there's an oversupply of policing in terms of the number of employees, in terms of the actions that are said to be illegal, that don't have any victims, that don't harm person or property. There's a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability, and a lack of efficiency. So these are all things that exist today because that there's a claim monopoly for this good or service, safety, or protection. And obviously it's a good or service that's in demand. We all want to be safe and secure. So the question is, if this is a desirable goal, then there's probably a better means to get there. And that's usually the line that I use when I have conversations with police employees. Like, I'm not necessarily, this isn't an anti-cop message. It's a lot of folks that go into policing do so with good intentions. It's just saying, hey, perhaps there's a better mechanism to bring this about. And a lot of times police employees will, readily admit that they work with some colleagues that are heavy-handed or that they know are corrupt. So if you can paint the picture for these police employees and say, wouldn't you prefer to work in an environment where that wasn't the case? If they're a good police employee, then that's more often than not their preference. And in a structure that is not a coercive monopoly, there would be more accountability. And if I had a protection company, I would not knowingly hire someone who was aggressive because it could potentially bankrupt me, and I could be, held accountable. So you want to, I guess, as much as you can, I guess, try to just keep that kind of stuff in mind. And even, even to the point where these coercive monopolies, like if you ran a business, you'd probably want to hire the person with the most skills or the most aptitude or whatever. But there's been instances, this guy named Robert Jordan who applied for New London Police Department. This was a decade ago, but he was rejected, and the reason why he was rejected is they said his IQ was too high. So he sued for discrimination, and they said that he was ruled against, and then it went to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and the reason that they still ruled against him was they said since he scored too high, he could get bored with police work and might soon leave after undergoing costly training. So it's like, wouldn't you think if you, yeah, right? Wouldn't you think if you ran a business, you'd want the best person? And so they want, my thought is that they want folks that will be more conformist or obedient or whatever, so they didn't want to bring them on board. There's, a statement I heard when I was on the road. I just did this month-long CopBlock tour, went to a couple dozen cities, and, a guy I met, he said, when accountability doesn't match responsibility, there's an issue. And today that's what we have. The police employees are thought to have all this authority to be able to enforce the laws and things, but at the same time, they're never held responsible for their actions because of this claimed double standard. So they have these legal fictions created, such as sovereign immunity, which say, I was acting, under color of law, so I'm not held accountable for my actions. So the fact that an individual can act and then claim to not be accountable for their actions really leads to some bad things. And I know these aren't maybe revolutionary ideas I'm sharing. I just want to make clear a case to unpack the mysticism that surrounds the police state, the policing structure as it is today, to really then hopefully make a more compelling case for a society without a coercive monopoly for this institution. Another instance that comes to my mind, I lived in Minnesota when I was a teenager, and one instance that happened, this was back in 2008, there was a guy who was at home with his family and 6 children, middle of the night. Here's his door get kicked in, and a bunch of people rush in. He's scared. He's got 6 kids, 3 to 15 years old. He's got his gun, and so he's like, he's looking down the stairway, sees some people come in. There's an exchange of gunfire. And then the folks who broke in identify themselves. Turns out they were wearing Minneapolis PD badges, and no one was shot in this exchange. And the chief of police down there later apologized, and then they later said they raided the wrong house, and then the folks who broke into the house were later given awards. So, I mean, think about the perverse incentives that is, that allows for. And the person's, the woman, the man's wife who lived in the house, Yi Mao, she said, my family's a mess. My son who saw the shooting has nightmares and need therapy. They've ruined a life. I don't understand why they get rewarded for that. So these are the kind of disincentives that exist in this monopoly today. And to even go back to them saying we've raided the wrong house, oftentimes you hear that. They raid the wrong house, they shoot a dog, they raid the wrong house and shoot somebody who thought they were getting burglarized. And so, but what would be the right house? Oftentimes these raids are used for people who might possess a substance other people say is illicit. But the real question is that hurting anybody? And it's not. Just the mere possession of a substance, you know. So the fact that, you know, they might write it off and say, sorry, we raided the wrong house. I mean, even if you're raiding the right house, it doesn't, that to me is still a flawed idea, because that use of force to go into somebody's house is oftentimes aggression. You know, it's violating someone's property rights, it's violating their right, you know, they own their self-ownership rights to put whatever they want in their body as long as they're not hurting somebody else. You know, so that's something I'd encourage you to think about, you know, when you see, oh, they accidentally raided the wrong house. I mean, there's no incentive not to raid the wrong house, because, you know, what happens? They get sued, then they get people who were wrong get money, if they're successful, from taxpayers, from other people in the area, so it really doesn't hurt the individual who acted in the wrong. Another thing to keep in mind, so we touched on the sovereign immunity. That's, you know, a pretty ridiculous idea. To me, it's just like this legal land fiction. Another idea is this no duty to protect the individual. So is that new? Is this new for some of y'all? Like that police have no duty to protect the individual?